Hey guys, welcome back to our JavaScript series. In this video, we're going to talk about conditional statements in JavaScript. Now, conditional statements basically allow you to execute specific blocks of code based on conditions. So let's say you have three different blocks of code and you want to execute that block according to some condition. In that case, you can use conditional statements. Now, in this video, we are going to cover four things over here. First thing we are going to cover is the if clause. Second thing is the else clause. And third thing is else if clause. Okay. And finally, we're going to talk about switch statement. So all these things we're going to cover in this video. Let's get started. And by the way, before we go ahead, one last thing that I want to say is that this video is based on your knowledge on blocks. You should have a knowledge on blocks, otherwise you won't be able to understand the concepts in this video. So if you don't have that knowledge, you can just go and watch the lecture number 10 where we discussed about it. And then you can come back here. So let's get started. First of all, let's discuss about a very basic example so that you can understand the significance of this conditional statements, right? So let's go and copy this code over here and paste it here. Now, let's take an example. I have a variable, let's say A, and I want to actually go and print print that A is greater than 4. So I just want to print this A is greater than 4. I want to print this if A is actually greater than 4. Right now, it's just being printed even when A is not greater than 4. It's equal to 4, but it's not greater than 4. But still, this is being printed. So how I can solve that? How I can print this only when A is greater than 4? Now, if you watch the operators lecture, you might have learned about the ternary operator. So with that, you can just go and use that, right? So you can just say A is more than 4, and then only you just go and print that console log. Otherwise, you just say undefined. This is basically gonna print this, or you can say this is gonna evaluate this only when A is more than 4. In this case, it was not, so that's why you didn't got any output. But let's say if I go and say A is, let's say A is more than, or let's say, let me modify the value. Let's say A equal to 6. Um, so when I do that, you can see I get the value, I get this printed, A is greater than 4. So you can see conditional statements can help me over there. This conditional operator can help me over there. So you might ask why conditional statements are needed in that case. The thing is that when conditions grow complex, or let's say the code you want to execute grows complex, then a better option is always a conditional statement. Okay. Now I'm going to show you a better example of where conditional operator won't be a good option. I would tell you about that, but for now, just digest that fact, and we're gonna come back to that later on in this video only. So let's see how we can solve that, like how we can solve that with a conditional statements, like by using one of these things. So what I can do, I can just go and use the if clause over here. Okay. So what I can do, I can just go and say if, and then what I need to do, I need to go and give the parenthesis. Inside that, I need to write the condition that I want to evaluate. In this case, I want to evaluate the condition that A is more than 4. Okay. Now I need to write a block. So you already know you can give a block like this. So you can see this block is basically attached with this if thing. Okay. Now I hope this is readable enough. That is that if A is more than 4, we execute this block. If A is not more than 4, then we don't execute it. So I can just write anything I want to write in this. So for example, I want to write this one. So I can just do that, and you can see it's getting printed like that. Now obviously, because of this block, you can have multiple lines of code over here, right? So you can just say console log hey as well with that, which was basically not possible over here. Like it's possible when you use functions in JavaScript, then it will be possible even over here. But right now you can see uh, it's not really possible to have like multiple statements over here. And so a better option, obviously, until unless you know about functions, is this only, where you can write multiple lines of code inside that block, and those code would be executed only when A is more than 4. I can show you what happened if a is less than 4. So if I go back to the value of, let's say if I go to 3 value, in this case, if I try to do this again, you can see these lines are basically skipped. And this actually proves that, right? You can see the gray thing. That proves that the line was actually skipped because the condition was false over here. So I hope that is clear. That's how you can use the if clause. Now, if clause is already clear with just the basic example. Now let's talk about the else clause. So what is else clause? Else clause basically is helpful if you want to run a code when the condition inside the if clause is false. So let's say if this condition is false, I want to run some other code, then I can use the else clause. Now for that, I would just like to show you the vote eligibility checker thing. Now again, you can solve that with ternary operator. Actually, I showed you that example only. If I go to ternary operator over here, actually conditional operator, yeah. So you can see over here, I showed you that example only, that you can just go and say age is more than equal to 18, and then you can say you can vote. Otherwise, you can say you can't vote. So I want to implement something like this with if else. Okay, so I can just go and say this. Now, let me go and say age equal to 18. Okay. So you can see I get you can vote. Let me just keep it over here. And yeah, now let's try to solve it by if. Now, if you try to do that, I can just go and say if age more than equal to 18, right? So you're basically following what you followed over here, that you just write the condition inside the parentheses and you have the if, and then you get the block where you have the code that you want to execute. In this case, I want to execute this statement, so I just copy that over here, and you can see I'm getting you can vote. Okay. Now this is all fine, but let's imagine that age was actually not 18. So I'm just going to make it let, and let's see what happens then. So if I go and say age is 17, for example, now if I try to run this code, you would see that I'm getting the output of you can, I mean, so you can see when I run this code here, you can see I'm not getting any output. Now I want to get this output. How will that be possible? That will not be possible just with if. You need to attach something else as well with that, and that is else. So you can just say else over here. Now here you don't need to do any kind of parenthesis, because this basically means that if this is true, then you execute this block. But if this is not true, then in any case you execute this else block. So here you can just go and say you can't vote. Let me copy that, and you can see I get you can't vote. Okay. That is how you can see we can basically go and use if else over here. So if this condition is false, then only this will be executed. But if this is true, then this won't be executed. Just to show you one more thing over here, if I go and say age equal to 19, then you can see only this is executed and this is ignored. Okay. So that's how you can see we can use if else over here, just like we use ternary operators. Obviously, this is more clear in terms of readability. Like this makes sense only by reading. If you were not aware about conditional operator, you might not have even guessed what this code is doing without executing it, obviously, because these things like question mark, colon doesn't make any kind of sense. But if else, these literal words makes a lot of sense, and that's why this is actually more readable. Okay. Now that's how you can use the if and else clause. And by the way, else can come alone, right? You can't just use else like that. If I try to do that, it would cause error. So if I go and say else console log else clause, you can see I'm getting declaration of statement expected. This is happening because an else is supported by if. You can't use else without using if. Okay, that's a condition. Like, I mean, even if you like think logically, how else would be helpful if there's no if? Else depends on the condition of if. If the condition is false, only then else gets executed. So without if, else doesn't make any kind of sense, and that's why it's not even possible to directly use else. Okay, you need to have a if with it. So I hope that's clear. Now let's talk about the final example over here that would clear the else if thing. Okay. Okay, let's talk about it. So if you see over here, I have now a problem where I want to check if temperature, like there's a variable or constant, let's imagine. So I'm just going to create a variable, for example. Let's give it some random value, for example, 45. Now what I want to do, I want to check if temperature is less than 0, then I want to say freezing weather. If temperature is in this range, basically 0 to 10, then I want to say that it's a very cold weather. If temperature is in 10 to 20 range, then cold weather. Like that, I want to do some console logs according to that. Okay. So what I can do in that case, I can not do this just with if or just with if else. It's not possible because there are multiple conditions over here which we need to check to come on a final conclusion. And so the only way to do that is to use else if or switch. Okay. So what you can do, let me show you. So first of all, you look at the first condition. The first condition is if temperature is less than 0, then freezing weather. So you can just go and say if temperature is less than 0, then you go and say freezing weather. Okay. Now once you have done this, now you want to actually check for another condition. Now if you directly give else over here, that would mean that if this doesn't occur, then then basically else would be executed. So if I say very cold weather over here, then you can see it's getting executed. Although the condition says that if temperature is more than equal to 40, which is the case over here, then I should print it's very hot. This is happening because obviously this is false. So this just gets executed for any condition that is in this range. So what I can do in that case, I can use something called else if. Now else if basically allows you to do more than one check for condition. So the first check you do in the if clause, the next checks you can do in the else if clause. So you can do something like this, else if, then you can just say temperature is more than equal to 0 and then temperature is less than 10. Then you say very cold weather. So hopefully you can understand this. I did the first condition check and then I did the second conditional check. That's how I'm doing. In the same way, I can write the other conditions as well. So let me just quickly do that and then I would come back to this. So you can see I've written all the conditions over here. Now let's actually try to understand this once. So you can see over here, in this case, I get it's very hot. Okay. So what is happening over here? Let me tell you. Basically, we first of all say that if temperature is less than 0, then we print console log freezing weather. Now, if this is true, then obviously this would be executed and other statements would basically be ignored. But let's imagine that this was false. In that case, this would be checked. Now, in this case, this you can see it's using end operator. Okay. So if you try to think about it, temperature is more than equal to 0. That would basically convert to false. Okay. Because I mean, sorry, it would be true because temperature is more than equal to 0. But the temperature is less than 10 would become false. Now you know that for end, both should be true to get true. So this would basically yield to false. Okay. So this also fails. And so it checks for this, then it checks for this, then it checks for this. So basically all the conditions over here would become false. And so because all of them became false, the final hook was else. And that's why you got else into else and the else gets executed. I hope that's clear. Let me give you one more example over here. If I go and say, let's say 20, then you can see I get the output. I get this output over here. Okay. Normal temperature. Okay. Um, I think I should remove this. So you can see that that's what is happening over here. Now, one thing you can see from this green and like gray rectangle squares over here, as you can see, one thing you can see over here is that this condition, this line, or basically this condition was checked. It was false, and so this condition was checked, but this line was ignored. This condition was also false, so this line was ignored, but this condition was checked. Basically, green squares are those who were checked, and gray are those who were skipped. Then this was skipped because this was false. This was true, so this was executed, and then the rest conditions were not even checked. Okay, so that is one more important thing you need to understand, that if uh, else if one of the else if or if is true, then it doesn't even care about other else if or else statements. It doesn't care about it at all. It doesn't even check the condition after that, because it would only execute one of these blocks from here. It won't execute all of them. And if there was no else and the temperature was more than 40, maybe 45, then it won't execute any block over here. It would check all of them, but it didn't found any match, and so it didn't execute anything, right? So that is something you need to understand. And by the way, one thing you saw from this, that if and else if can live without else, but again else if can't be used separately. Else if can't live without if. Again, that's also one more thing. You need to pair else if with if. It's not possible to have else if without if, but you can have else if without else, or you can have else without else if. Both are possible, but both without if is not possible. That's a very important thing to understand. I hope this is all clear, and that's how you can use these things. Now, you might ask, what was the reason why we didn't use conditional operators over here? The reason is the readability. First of all, this is more readable. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that you have to always use it. Sometimes this is a better option, because this is much more concise than this, right? This is much more verbose. So better sometimes is this only, but sometimes if, else if, and else are more important. For example, in this case, you can see now you can go and create something like this with ternary operator as well. Let me show you how you can do that. So I can just go and say temperature is less than 0. Then we go and say freezing weather. Okay. Otherwise, we do other conditional checks. So if temperature is more than equal to 0, and then temperature is less than 10, then we say very cold weather. I should go and say this, and then I can say this over here. Actually, this. So I say this condition. If this is true, then I go and say cold weather. Okay, so you can see over here, I crafted this thing with with the ternary or conditional operator over here, and you can see this behaves in the same way. It prints normal temperature only. Now, if that is possible, why I didn't use it? As I said, because of readability. Now just see which is more readable. I hope your answer is this, right? Because this is more readable. Like if you read about it, it's very easy to understand just by reading it. If temperature is less than 0, then you will say freezing weather. Else if temperature is less than equal to 0 and uh temperature is more than equal to 0 and temperature is less than 10, then you print this. So it's readable, but this is not readable. Obviously this works, like temperature is less than 0, then you just print this. Otherwise you have a nested conditional operator, you can see. So we are using conditional operators in a nested way over here to get to the output, but this is not very readable, and so sometimes better options obviously if, else, and else if clauses. One thing over here is that curly braces are optional if there's only one statement in the block. Now that applies to if, else, and else if, all of them. Okay. So what that means is that if, let's say, there's only one line in the block, for example, in this case, there was only one line. Okay. So in that case, you can actually go and remove that block. So I can just go and directly write it without block. Okay. So I'm just going to remove block from here as well. So you can see, let me format this. Format. So you can see over here that I wrote the if and one of the else if without any kind of curly braces. The reason was that uh, there was only one statement. Okay, and so you can do something like this, which makes it even more readable. Okay, let me show you that. I'm gonna remove from each of them and then show you that. So you can see it's more concise, and I meant concise only, not readable actually. Readable, it's already readable. Obviously, this is also readable, but you can see this is more concise, and so it looks pretty, right? But it's not possible when there are multiple lines of code. Okay, it's only possible when there's just one line of code inside the block. Okay. Next, there can be nested if, else, and else if. What I mean by that? What I mean over here is that you can have nested if else. Okay. So let's say I can just go and have a variable or let's say constant 4. Okay. A constant b that has a value of 4. Now, if I say if b is more than 4, then you just say b is greater than 4. Than 4. Okay. And otherwise, you check if b is equal to 4, then you print b is equal to 4. Otherwise, you go and say b is less than 4. So I hope this makes a lot of sense. I mean, if b is not more than 4, then we go over here. And if b is not more than 4, then only two things are left with b. It can either be equal to 4 or it can be less than 4. And by the way, I would use triple equals to, because it's strict equality. I love to use it more than double equals to. Double equals to can cause some bugs, as I've shown you in type conversion, so better to avoid it. But yeah, so basically what I'm trying to say is that you can see over here that only two conditions are left, either equals or less. So I did a nested conditional check, like inside this else, I wrote another if else block, and inside that I did that check. Now, obviously, you could just go and do something like this over here, that if b is more than 4, you go and say b is greater than 4, and then let me get this, and otherwise, what you could have done is that you could just have used else if over here. So I could just go and say else if, and then I just did something like this, right? So that is also possible, but I just want to show you that nested if else is also possible. It's not something that you can't do, because obviously blocks can be nested. So there's no way you can't nest something like this, right? And then one last thing over here, which I want to tell, and that is it. Obviously, because this is a block, you can't access the variables created inside this block. So if I go and say const b equal to, let's say const c equal to 4, then if I try to check the value of c over here, you can see c is not defined because it was created inside that block. It is just accessible inside that block. Obviously, in this case, that block was not executed, so you can't see the value of c, but it would only be possible to execute it, to actually get the value inside that block. Let me show you it over here. So you can see I got the value inside this, but I can't access outside this, even when this block was executed. Okay, so I can just say this, c is not defined. And then finally, shadowing also works here. So if you actually grab this, try to paste it over here. Now, if you try to go and say const b equal to 8, then you would see that b would basically become 8 inside the block, but outside the block, it's still 4. Okay. So I hope that is also clear. You can see this shadowed the outer b, and so that's why you can see it something like this, right? So I hope all that is clear. Okay, now let's talk about switch statement. Now, switch statement is a very efficient way to replace like multiple if else else if chains. Like here you can see it's a large chain of if else if else. There can be even larger chains of if else if else. I can show you one example here. Let me write that down first and then I can show you that. So you can see one example that I've written with if, else, if, and else. You can see basically if day is equal to 1, then we're printing Monday. Day is equal to 2, we're printing Tuesday, and so on till day equal to 7, that is Sunday. And if there's any other day input, then we say invalid day. So you can see this is a very simple example. You can just change the value, for example, to 4, and that would just print Thursday. Now this is very easy. So if you see this, it's kind of messy, right? There's a lot going on here. If you see the whole code over here, there's a lot of things that are there, and so it looks messier. So you can see when there's a long chain of if, else, if, and else, then there would be a problem because it would look messy. And so to fix that, one good way is to use switch statement. Okay. So let me show you how you can do that. So in this case, what you can do, you can just say switch. And now inside this parenthesis, you need to specify the value you want to compare with. So in this case, I want to compare with the day constant. Okay. And then you need to give this. Once you have done that, now you need to do something called case. So you need to write some switch cases. Okay. So cases is basically the values uh, this could have. So this could have, for example, 1. So I can just write a case 1. So what that means is that if the value of day is 1, then it would just execute this case. Okay. So in that, I can just go and write Monday. Okay. Uh, and then I can just go and give a break over here. Now, why I am giving a break over here, that's something I would tell you. But for now, just remember that you have to do that. And then you can write the second case where you just say Tuesday, right? And then you say Wednesday, then Thursday, then Friday, then Saturday, and Sunday. All that is covered with case till case 7. Finally, you write default. Default means if none of these case matches, it's gonna go to default. So basically, the first case is like if any case between the first case and default case is basically like else if, and the final case is like else. Okay. So here I can just write invalid day, and here you can provide a break or you can even ignore it here. Again, why you can ignore it here, why you had to provide it here, I'm going to tell you that all that over in this video only after some time. But basically you can see I get the output from there Thursday. Okay, so this is working fine because uh, the case 4 matches over here. So basically whatever value you're providing in all these cases, switch statement is going to compare those values with the value that you have with the value you have provided over here, or the variable value you have provided over here, variable or constant. So in this case, it compared the value of day, which was 4. So it matched it with case 4 and then just printed the value of and just executed the whatever was written over there. By the way, a case can have different, a case can have multiple lines as well. So I can just even go and say console log k, and that would work well with that. Okay. So it's not like you can only give one line over here, you can give multiple lines of code in that. But you can already see how clean that is in comparison to this. This looks very good and this looks messy. And so that's why I was saying that sometimes switch is a better option than if else long chain. Okay. By the way, the equality that happens over here is a strict equality. What I mean by that is that you can't expect something like this to work, that if you're saying 1 double equals to 1, that gives you true in JavaScript because because you're using double equals to, but when you use triple equals to, that doesn't work, right? Why that doesn't work? The reason is because you're doing a strict equality check, which also checks the type as well. So my point is that switch statement equality check is strict. Okay. um that is very important to basically understand, because let's say if you take this switch statement, let me copy this, and if I go and paste it below this, and then if I go and say case 4, you can see when I do that, the log that I wrote over here is gone. Basically, I'm not no longer getting this console log printed. Instead, I'm getting console log invalid day. The reason obviously is that day is a number 4, whereas case this case has 4 as a string. Both are not equals. Both are not equal when you talk about strict equality check, and that's why you're not getting the value printed. So be very careful when you're doing that, because the value because basically you are the switch statement does a strict equality check. Okay. Then let's talk about grouping cases. So grouping cases, what I mean by that, let me show you. So if you see this example over here, if case is 1, then I print 1 or 2. And the same I do when case is 2. Then I go and say case 3, and here I print 3. Case 4 prints case 4 or 5. Case 5 also prints 4 or 5. So you can see one thing over here, that both of these cases executes the same code. In the same way, both of these cases executes the same code. So can we do something over here? Can we improve this? The answer is yes. We can definitely improve this by grouping cases. So let me show you what I meant by that. So I can just go and say, I can group case 1 and case 2. So I just remove this code over here, and you can see I directly wrote the case 1 out and case 2. Both are directly written. In the same way, I remove this case 4 code, and case 4 and case 5 are now the same. So if I go and say C equal to, actually let me see if it's a const, right? So let me make it let. So right now you can see it's executing this block. If I make it C equal to 3, then you can see it's executing this block. If I say C equal to 4, it's executing this block. If I say C equal to 5, even then it would execute that same block. So, 1 would execute this block, 2 would execute the same block, 6 would execute the default block. So you can see that uh, I can, this is how I can basically go and group cases to basically let the cases perform the same, basically let them perform the same code if the case match happens. And that's how you can use this technique of grouping cases. Okay. Now, one more thing over here, why breaks have to be there? That's a very important question to answer. So see, the thing is that break basically helps you to get out of switch if a case matches. Now, why that is needed, you might ask? That is needed so that the other cases are not executed, because that's a thing with switch. If one of the case matches, right, then it would get executed, and even every case after that would be executed if there's no break in between. Okay, so let's take an example of this only. So switch day, let's take an example here. Let's copy this. I think that's what it is, I guess. Yeah. And then I just go, and actually this one is correct. Let me copy that one. Yes. And let me make this let, because I would change the values over here just to show you what is happening. Now, let's say I copy this over here. You can see I'm getting the output of Thursday. Okay. Now, let's say I remove the break. Okay. I am removing the break over here. Let me first of all do this, and then I would remove the break. I would get back to making it. Uh, I would I would make this day again. Let's go and remove all the breaks over here. So you can see right now it's printing invalid day because obviously this is invalid. Let's go and say day now. Now when I say day, your assumption should be that like it's day is right now what? Day is 4, right? So you might assume that it's gonna print Thursday. But you can see it's printing Thursday, but with that it's printing every other thing over here as well. Let me show you the console just to make it way more clear. It's printing Thursday, it's printing Friday, it's printing Saturday, Sunday, invalid day. It's not printing anything before the matching case, but it's printing everything after the matching case. As I said, the reason is break. You are not given any kind of break over here, and that's why this is happening. If I just added a single break statement over there, you can see now the things go well again. But if I make day 5 over here, for example, then you can see the things again go bad. And that's what I was saying. You have to give a break statement to end switch from executing other cases. Okay. So that's the thing. Now, the next thing, why the last case doesn't need a break. In this case, the last case was default case. So why it didn't need a break over here? The reason is very simple. After default case, there's no case. So it doesn't really matter. Or if let's say default case was not there, if I remove that default case, after case 7, there's no case. So break statement is not really needed because after that nothing is there to execute. So it's all fine. Let me show you. If I go and remove this right now, you can see there's a problem, right? I'm getting Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But if I go and basically make the day 7, for example, then you can see I'm getting Sunday, but after that I'm not getting anything because there's nothing to show after that. There's nothing to execute after that. And so break, you can give that break over here. It's not going to cause any kind of issues, but it's not required at that point. That's my point. Okay. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense to you. And that's how basically we can understand about breaks. And like that's why breaks are important in case of all the cases that are not the last case. Now let's finally talk about solving the temperature example with switch statement. Now, you can see I shown you a lot of examples for switch, but all of them were doing an equality check. So what is going on here? The thing that is going on here is that switch statement normally doesn't support operators. You can't use more than equals to, you can't use less than equals to, you can't use and you can't use and operator, you can't use or operator. All these are not allowed directly, but there is a way to do that. So let me show you how you can do that. So what you just need to do, you just need to say switch. Actually, let me first of all grab that temperature example so that you can see it. And then we're gonna write the switch for that. Okay. Now let's rewrite this with switch. So as I said, these things won't be allowed. Less than won't be allowed. More than equal to won't be allowed. And operator won't be allowed. Less than operator won't be allowed. So what you can do here is very easy. You can just go and do something like this. Switch true, and then you can write the cases. Now, let's do that. So write the cases, and all the cases are written, and you can see it works fine. Now, let's analyze why this is actually working. By the way, it's a very important trick, and it's a very interesting trick over here. Think about it. What switch does? Switch compares the value given over here to the value of the case. Now, if case is an expression, then switch statement first of all solves that expression, gets the value, compare it with the value given in the switch. So now imagine this. What these things are doing. These things are just trying to get a condition that is true. That's all they are doing, right? That's the purpose of it. So if you think about it, here temperature is less than 0, that is going to give you false, which is not going to match this. And so this won't be executed. But temperature was what? Temperature, let's check. Just to check, temperature is 20. So because temperature is 20, this condition would become true. Temperature more than equal to 20 would become true, and temperature less than 30 would become also true. True and then true is true. So this whole becomes true, which matches the true given over here, and that's why you can actually use operators as well with switch statement by following this trick. Now, is it worth it to do that? You can decide on your own. Whatever you think is a better solution for you, you can use that. I believe switch is a better way when there is a lot of conditions because it's much cleaner than if else things. Okay. So that's what I think. But again, it depends. Now, for example, in this case, when there was just like, for example, it is this one, or let's say this if else if one where we were just like doing three comparisons. Yeah, so three clauses were there. So in these cases when there's just like one else if and else, and or there's just if and else, then honestly I use else if directly. Otherwise, if there's a lot of else if, I prefer using switch statements because they are much cleaner in that case. Okay, so yeah, that's the opinion I have on switch statements. But hopefully you got an understanding about conditional statements in JavaScript. I hope these were easy for you, especially if you are a person who already know about some other language, you might be knowing about it. So yeah, that's all for this video. If you have any questions, you can drop that down in the comment section below. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.